Hello, and welcome to the Transformation Stories podcast. My name is Adia, and I'm the host of this series, a series created by the Adornment Stories Collective. Make sure you're going to adornmentstories.com/podcast to learn more. This week, I am very excited to have Sade Petlele on the show. They are a makeup artist and a past participant of the Adornment Stories program, the series of workshops that we conduct every year. And they will be discussing how they use makeup and its transformative process to tell stories. They've worked on a few different projects with Adornment Stories in the past, including a video essay on Afrofuturism. We kind of talk a little bit about that. They've done a Q&A for the blog, so I'll link some videos and some additional information in the show notes if you're curious to check that out. They've also worked with Nia Zamar, which is sort of the sister company to Adornment Stories. So I'll link some information about that below so you can check all of those out. I'll even try to link the virtual exhibit of the past projects that the different participants have done for the Adornment Stories program. I'll link those as well so you can check out the virtual exhibit of Sade's art, digital artwork. So without further ado, we'll dive right into the interview. Let's get into it. All right. Hi. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited. I feel like I've been waiting on this podcast, excited for it to drop for a while now. So thank you for having me.
Of course. So why don't we start with some introductions? You can tell everybody your name and sort of what you do. Just give a sense.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Sade. I am I guess I do a lot of, like many people do, a lot of things. So in that same way, I'm a makeup artist. I do specifically focusing on creating makeup-based content as opposed to doing makeup is more like a client-based thing, but I've done a bit of both. I also do makeup-based workshops and education, so kind of like the basics of makeup and how it connects to self-love and self-expression. And I'm also, I work as a intern assistant over at Adornment Stories.
Okay, great. This is great. Very millennial to have so many different avenues of work.
8 titles.
just one thing.
It's we're not special. It's you've 8 titles. Everybody has 8 titles. It is what it is.
Right? If your resume isn't 8 pages long, then what are you doing, really, right?
What are we doing?
All right. So we can dive right in. We actually did a Q&A with you for the blog last year, which was fun. So this is sort of, I guess, a part 2 in a sense.
Yeah. I guess a part 2, an audio part 2. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that I kind of talked about in the Q&A I've built on, because it was a while ago that we did it, maybe a year and a half ago or a year ago. So definitely I feel like I'm excited because I feel like there's more to add to this one.
I mean, yeah, it's not like anything's changed, right, in a year and a half. No big major events, nothing new.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't know. Nothing's really different.
Just kidding. Well, we can start with where does your creative process sort of start? Where do you get inspiration as an artist, as a makeup artist specifically?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's a lot of the baseline of it is just seeing things on Instagram, and then that inspires me, and then I kind of base it off of that. But I think more broadly, it made me realize that a lot of art is based on inspiration. So I think before I was kind of always trying to recreate everything kind of from my own brain, almost as if that was kind of that's more authentic or that's more real. And I think what I've realized is that a lot of people kind of just gather inspiration from when you're moving through the world and moving through Instagram or whatever, I'll see something that kind of spurs me, and then not necessarily copying it perfectly, but I think having that constant thread of inspiration for me has been really helpful in my own practice. So yeah, I would say Instagram. Occasionally I'll see things in real life, but I feel like it's mostly Instagram. And I think I've also set up my own, like, I guess, like, Instagram feed or whatever people have. Like, it doesn't have to be like a specific platform, but just something where you engage with it a lot. You're constantly seeing like work that you want to do. And I think that I've set up my own Instagram in a way where there's this constant inspiration for me to kind of like get started, because I was definitely falling into kind of like a very difficult, like, artistic trap of like I don't know what to do, like I don't know where to start, like I don't have any ideas, like almost like the well running dry. So for me, like the creative process, a big part of it is getting inspiration from other people and intentionally creating I guess basically like kind of like a well, or like a constant like interaction for me with things that with inspiration for the art that I do.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I think it's important for artists to look at other artists, right, to get that inspiration. And it's not always, pulling directly from life, but from the people who kind of see the world in that artistic way as well. So that makes a lot of sense as well. What is your favorite part about the transformation process when you're doing a look, you're putting things together? What's your favorite sort of part of that process?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. I guess it's hard because I feel like there's a lot of favorite parts, but I think maybe I could like point to like a feeling or a specific like piece of the transformation process for me, which I think applies to like the work that I do in makeup, but I think can apply to a lot of different forms of art, where it's kind of like you're not like quite finished, like you're still doing it, but the moment, I think for me, when I feel like I look at like what I've created so far and I'm like close to being done, but there's still more work to go, but I kind of see where it's like, oh, this is coming together. I think that moment of like, this is like what I had in my head in the beginning of the day when I started this makeup thing, like I started this like look, up until now, like this is going to become what I wanted it to be. And I feel like in a way that's almost more fulfilling than like the very end for some reason, like that feeling of like it's like you're almost like on the horizon, the potential of what it could be, and there's still last touches, like you don't, almost like that feeling of like you don't know what it's going to turn out as. And I think for me, there's a sense of being like, even though I have a baseline idea of what I want, and I think most artists can like have felt this way, where it's you have an idea of like what you want your end result to be, but the journey to that end result of transformation like just kind of takes you in different directions. You start adding things you didn't think you were going to add. You start like adjusting things. But the moment where I feel like I'm coming to the end, but I'm not quite finished, for me is my favorite piece.
Wow, that's a interesting point, actually. It's almost like a climax in a sense, right? Like of a story where you're at that peak moment, but before you hit like the resolution where you just see everything like coming together in a sense.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. It's like not the end of the story. It's not the end of the movie. So it's not like that final like and then there's that wrap up, but it's kind of like the biggest piece is like it's happening in that moment. Maybe that's what it is. It's just very like exciting. It's very like fulfilling, and I think that the end is very satisfying and very like oh, I'm done. But there's something about that moment of like the potential of the end of like what it's going to become that is just so exciting to me.
Yeah, I love that actually. Um, Actually, that kind of leads into one of my questions is, would you consider makeup a form of storytelling, and how so?
Yeah, I guess I asked this question too, and I feel like I think about it as, I guess that there's my first thought when I read this question was like the kind of the more obvious or like idea of makeup as storytelling, which is like kind of like cosplay or costumes or things like that, which I get a lot of inspiration from for my own work, even if I don't do full maybe like costumes or entirely like recreating a character. I really draw from the idea that like makeup is supposed to kind of at least bring a story to your mind, like even if like it's not telling, even if you have a story that it's trying to tell, when people see it, kind of like any other art, they create a story of kind of like what, like I guess what they're visualizing. So when I think about cosplay or costumes or like had Halloween or whatever, when you kind of create a look, people look at you and they almost know, they not only know what you are, but the different pieces, the small details that you put into it all work together to create like a story, I think, in that person's mind. So I guess for me, I was kind of struggling with how the two things connected, because I knew that they do connect, but I guess I never really thought about it. But I think the first thing that came to my mind was things like costumes. And I think what's nice about more like costumey makeup, for me at least, that it's more costumey, but isn't necessarily like a character people recognize or even a character that exists. It's just kind of creating something, is that people have an idea of what I was going for, but they can kind of like imprint their own story on a look. I guess an example of that would be I remember one time I did like a makeup look where I painted myself blue, and I kind of like, I guess, became like an alien kind of thing. And I painted like moons and stars, but also just kind of like things that are reminiscent of makeup that we wear now, like kind of like brows, like lips, things like that. And when people responded to that, when I posted that photo and people responded to it, I just got a variance of like what people thought that this character was. And I guess in this moment, I'm realizing that it's storytelling and that like it creates a character. And I think when we see characters that don't have like a backstory to themselves that we know, we kind of create that. So I think it's, I guess the pieces that I'm kind of like, I'm going a bunch of different directions with that, but I think my main takeaways or like my main thoughts around storytelling, makeup as storytelling, is it's really useful in creating almost like characters or otherworldly beings that we're not used to seeing in real life. And the story kind of comes from that character, what you are trying to exude from that character, what people kind of take from that character, what they perceive it as when they see you.
Yeah, I think that actually does make a lot of sense. Like there's more to it behind, or it's what the audience is also adding to the look, and also where you're pulling that look from. All those elements kind of shape a story and a
Mm.
character, and a direction for the look itself, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So, speaking of sort of storytelling and like that makeup process and that journey, you developed a video essay on Afrofuturism where you talked about the history and relevance of that genre. What was it like to take on that kind of project? Because in a sense, you really are telling a story literally with your voiceover, kind of explaining the process of the look and why that look is relevant. So what was it like to make that kind of project happen?
Yeah, it was exciting. It was definitely exciting to take on that project because I think it's something that I had an interest in. Like, I feel like I really like the idea of Afrofuturism. I didn't know much about it until the past couple of years. But I think when I learned about it, excuse me, it was something that I knew could be like applied to like, yeah, like makeup and aesthetics, because there's other examples of Afrofuturism. Like there's definitely books, films, just schools of thought, music. There's so many different ways that like Afrofuturism is expressed through art, but I feel like makeup and adornment is a really important part because it brings that element of storytelling that we just talked about, to the idea of Blackness in the future and what Blackness imagined in the future can look like. I think that for me, what was like really exciting and interesting is that like there were pieces that I like learned about in Afrofuturism and tried to put in the look that I did for the video, excuse me, that were around kind of like both storytelling in terms of the future, but also in terms of the past. So when I think about like the look that I did or Afrofuturistic looks that I tend to see, they bring a lot of elements of, I guess, what we think of as like traditional Black and or African kind of like aesthetics. So like kind of like face paint, bright colors, patterns. And it's kind of, I think the Afrofuturism piece was really interesting because it not only to me made me realize that Afrofuturism and as an aesthetic, with makeup and adornment, not only tells a story about the future, but it also brings in elements of the past of who we were and who we are today. So I guess like, yeah, when I think about like the storytelling question that you asked, that's a really good example of makeup as storytelling, where it's bringing in like one continuous story, and conveying that visually with the body.
Yeah, I love that. Um, are there any kind of other projects or genres that you'd want to tap into to kind of do that sort of similar, um, I guess, video essay type format? Like, is there a different maybe genre you would pull into next if you were thinking about it?
Yeah, I guess I had thought about it. Recently, Adornment Stories did a Black Joy retreat, which you were also a part of, where we gathered different like Black artists and educators to kind of create spaces of like Black joy and like artistic creation. And I did a makeup tutorial for that event that focused kind of on like the ways that we've used makeup and adornment as resistance in the past, and also how we've used makeup and adornment as Black people for self-expression. And one piece that I learned about, and something that I feel somewhat connected to, is like the idea of like, I guess what I think of, or I think many people think of as like as African face paint, or like some people, it's also known as like tribal paint or like kind of things like that. But I think I just think of it generally as like African face paint. And my mom is South African, half South African. So I felt connected to it in a way of, I know it's something that I see, or something that like when I visually see, or when we went to South Africa, I would see people wearing face paint and things like that, but it was generally more like more traditional areas, like kind of like rural areas where people live more traditionally. It wasn't something that people in the cities really wore. And I think I've always had this connection or like understanding that like face paint is a part of many African cultures, but without a real understanding of what that meant, or like what the differences of different parts of Africa are. So when I did my makeup tutorial for the retreat, I kind of did more research into what does face paint mean for different groups? What is it trying to convey with color, with shape? And I think I got like a very base level understanding, because I didn't do it too much research, but I got a base level understanding of more how we've always used, I guess, like paint, color, like body adornment, in specifically as paint and color, like similar to makeup, as a way to tell a story. Even like certain lines, certain shapes, they convey a meaning in different areas because of different materials. Even like that would also play into the end result of the looks and the visuals that came through in their face paint. So to answer your question, I think I'd really like to do a deeper dive into that for my own reasons, a sense of being like, I know that face paint is part of my own, I guess, like media culture because of my mother, but then also realizing that I didn't have any real understanding of it. I've always seen it as a very like, oh, it's just face paint. Like I know people wear it. I see it at Afropunk and things like that, but I don't really have an understanding of where that came from. And so I think what I would like to look into is using video again to really dig into that story and like really deeply and find more nuanced understanding of what like painting and like body and face painting have meant. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'd be interested to see. Um, and sort of speaking and leading into that, educating through makeup, you actually started doing workshops for Nia Zamar, which is sort of the sister company, I guess you could say, to Adornment Stories.
Mhm.
How has that influenced your creative process, if at all? Do you find, teaching it makes it any kind of difference in how you think about that, or?
I think it does. I think teaching it is, I really enjoy it. And I guess before kind of leaning into workshops or and finding opportunities to do workshops, I was dabbling with like using makeup in a way of more client-based like business. So kind of doing people's makeup for them, or like kind of seeing if that was like an avenue that I wanted to do. Because it made a lot of sense to me at the time, where it's like, oh, you like doing makeup, you do makeup that people seem to enjoy, people want to do that makeup, but maybe they haven't practiced it in the same way, or they're not drawn to practicing it in the same way. So they maybe don't have like the ability or the tools in their house immediately to do that makeup. So maybe it makes sense for you to offer like your skills in that way. But I think what I was finding was there was always that disconnect of what a person wanted versus what I thought that what I wanted to provide, basically, like what the things that I wanted to paint and the creativity of that. And so I was finding a lot of, I guess, like blocks in that way of kind of wanting to recreate a look on somebody, but then kind of doing it in my own way. And they had their own idea of what they wanted out of the look. So for me, teaching it as opposed to doing it on or for someone felt different and felt like more like what I wanted to do, because I like having the freedom to kind of do like the makeup that I want on my own face, and sometimes the pressure of creating something for somebody else can feel very like daunting for sure. And I think a lot of makeup artists deal with that. And I think it's a really that's part of what makes it such a difficult like field, is that there's this disconnect between what you can create and what you want to create, and what the person is thinking in their mind of what they want to look like in the story that they want to tell. It's two different stories. And I think for me, workshops and webinars allowed for my story of the face, the makeup that I'm doing for my own face and for myself, and imparting like how I do it to somebody else, and then seeing them recreate that own story for themselves, is actually, it feels more true to what I like and what I wanted to do, as opposed to trying to find a middle thing for both of us. Because that's what I was finding doing makeup was for me. It was kind of both of us trying to compromise, where the person in the chair doesn't like, they can't control the makeup that I'm doing, because they're like they're in the chair and I'm like doing their makeup, so it's kind of, it is what it is. But then I'm also not wanting to go fully into what I want to do, because I also want to make sure that they get what they want. Whereas with the workshops, I felt like it was more like, I'm telling you my story and like how I do makeup, and giving you these like skills or tips, and then you're taking that and creating what you want from that information, as opposed to kind of trying to find that middle ground, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. It gives people the freedom to take what they want from the experience that makes sense for them, while you still get to maintain the creative um, idea that you were attempting to translate in the first place. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what advice would you give to aspiring makeup artists, people who maybe want to check out those workshops, or don't know where to start with creating a look?
Yeah, I guess the one major piece of advice that I think got in my way, for sure in the beginning, and I think it's in a lot of people's way when I talk to them, is that it's okay. It's like kind of removing the pressure from it. I think makeup, especially now, I would say maybe like this past decade, like the tens or whatever, has been a very big like explosion of makeup, like makeup tutorials and makeup like influencers and makeup products. Even just like there's so much more. We see it so much more often, and I think that's great in a lot of ways. I think it means we have access to different kinds of makeup that we didn't have before. Like we have access to more creativity and like more freedom to do kind of like what we want, because there's just like more options and more resources or pieces of education that people can use to get started. Like for me, I didn't really go to beauty school or makeup school or I didn't do any cosmetology based program. I kind of just taught myself with YouTube, because when I was in high school, that was kind of the beginning of like the YouTube I guess like makeup blogger kind of thing. And in a way, I feel almost lucky in that way, that was kind of like the time that I came up in, because it was a time where we still had access to like the tutorials and stuff, those pieces of information, but the piece around kind of like trying to sell something hadn't really come in yet, because it was new. Whereas now, especially when I work with people who are a little bit younger, who maybe came up in like a time where there was already an established like makeup tutorials are a thing, they're a moneymaker, like there's a ton of tutorials, there's people who are influencers and like they're known for doing makeup and I'm following them. Sometimes I think what happens in those situations is it's great that you have so much more access to different kinds of makeup and different kinds of education, but I think what happens for a lot of people is there's this intense pressure that they put on themselves that they have to do it in these ways, because there's already kind of like the set standard of like, you have to contour in these ways, and these are the videos that you contour in, and like this is how you apply lashes, and you have to apply lashes, and like this is a good like company to do palettes in. And I think what that does is I think it almost creates too many options to where it overwhelms people, and they feel like, oh well, there's all these things and I don't know where to start. And it also creates, I think, a feeling of I guess, yeah, so the first thing was that like you have to get certain things, you have to do certain things, but it also means that like, because it's a bit more profitable for companies to sell makeup, there's kind of a push of you have to do things in this way and you have to get all of these products. And if you don't really know makeup that well, it's kind of hard to sift through what are the things that I have to do or that I feel like makes sense for me, and what are the things that I actually want from my makeup look. So I guess I go into that because but the advice that I give is to just take the pressure off, and also it's okay to start slowly with a few things. And I think that helps both with feeling overwhelmed by the process, but I think it also is useful because you are not spending a lot on things that you actually don't want, or maybe you're spending a lot on eyeshadows, but you realize like I actually don't like applying eyeshadow. I don't want to wear eyeshadow at all. Or I'm spending a lot of money on contour kits or things like that, and it's like I actually don't care about contouring. I mainly want to do like blue face paint. Like I think starting off with a few small things, and kind of, and also the last piece of advice that I would give is thinking about like the aesthetics that you want, and instead of focusing on tutorials, focusing more on finding pictures or images or pieces that you're drawn to that you really want, and then honing in on those, as opposed to maybe finding really general tutorials around doing your makeup amazingly, or like kind of finding the things that speak to you and then focusing in on content around that. And I think that for me, when I learned those pieces around focusing into the things that I want, going slowly and being okay with that with a few products, and like not kind of like, I guess not necessarily like feeling like I have to do all of these steps because that's just what I've been taught is how we do makeup. I really was able to really like enjoy the process more, and to it also like helped with feeling overwhelmed, and definitely helped like with money, because makeup's expensive. Like this, it's like there's a lot of makeup out there, and that's the last piece too, is that like makeup does not have to be the most expensive thing ever, especially now that we're in a time where, because there are so many products, there are many products that maybe they're advertised like this is way better than this one because it's more expensive, and I don't necessarily think that's true. So that's the last piece too, is within your budget, don't feel like you have to overextend yourself, both like stress wise and money wise, to engage in makeup. You can just start wherever, and that's okay.
Wow, that's actually really great. Okay. Thank you so much. Where can people reach you?
Yeah, for sure. So I, on Instagram, I'm at sade.makes.art. Instagram did take my old account, so there's not much on there right now. It's definitely a starting from scratch. After everything was taken from me on Instagram. But definitely feel free to follow me there. There will be more makeup content coming to that page soon. I also, you can definitely find me on adornmentstories.com. There's work that I've done there, and also like ways to contact me through that. And as well as miazamar.com, because it's also, that's where I do a lot of workshops and just like create content through that platform. So those are the three places you can find me.
Great. And I'll make sure to link those for people to get easy access. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been great. I've had so much fun. You're going to have to come back for sure. Do this again in a year because, maybe things will change. Maybe they won't. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, like based on this year, I feel like they probably are going to change again. So
Yeah. You'll have more to teach.
yeah,
You'll have more to talk about. It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to see like what other guests you have and listen to other podcasts. I've been really excited for this podcast to like begin and like to be able to like to listen in. So I'm so excited to see future episodes, and thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, me too. I'm having fun seeing it come together as well. So I can't wait for everybody else to get to hear them. So again, we'll have to have you back soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our time. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to follow Adornment Stories on Instagram and Facebook at adornment.stories, and head over to adornmentstories.com/podcast for more details about the podcast. We will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.